My name is Lakeisha Mathis, and I am the Director of the Diverse Business Accelerator at the St. Louis Regional Chamber. Before we get started, I'd like to share a few housekeeping items. Everyone is automatically muted. We encourage you to ask questions throughout this webinar. Please submit those questions via the chat box, and we'll attempt to answer as many of those questions as possible as we move through this conversation. Everyone will receive a copy of this presentation after the webinar is complete. And before we go any further, I'd like to thank our sponsors, Technology Partner and Kitty Academy, who is serving St. Louis healthcare and essential businesses in this time of crisis. Without any further ado, I'd like to introduce my co-moderator, Dr. Cheryl Watkins-Moore, who serves as the Director of BioSTL's STEM Entrepreneurial Inclusion Initiative. BioSTL is a nonprofit organization focused in the life sciences that is a convener and one of the co-founders of St. Louis's robust startup innovation community. Cheryl's responsibility is for creating partnerships, processes, and programming that strengthens the region's STEM entrepreneurial ecosystem. Cheryl is also a serial entrepreneur. She's the co-founder of Real Cannabis Co., serving as the Chief Strategy and Marketing Officer. Cheryl is also the co-founder and host of the internationally recognized and regionally award-winning Entrepreneurially Thinking. Good morning, Cheryl.
Good morning, Lakeisha, and it's so good to hear your voice and to see your face. I'm so excited about this opportunity to bring this topic to the community. And what I wanted to first start off with was some business statistics around the coronavirus and how it's taken a toll on folks around the globe, especially Black business owners in the US. And we could say this is not just Black, this is Black and Brown entrepreneurs. So this was a study that was done by the Brookings Institute, which showed a history of how economic shocks such as the coronavirus has a major financial impact on our communities. This is recent information. After the Great Recession, more than 10 years ago, only 49% of Black-owned businesses actually survived the following years compared to 60% of white-owned businesses. And what we can also look at this aligned with that is our Latinx brothers and sisters out here in entrepreneurship. There was a study done by the Entrepreneurship Initiative that showed, and this is very current, talking about the impact of COVID on their businesses. 65% of the respondents reported that they will not be able to continue operating beyond 6 months if current conditions exist. So we know that our communities and our businesses are hit at a higher rate. And for us to bounce back, it's very difficult. Some of the reasons behind that, as we all know, white families have 10 times the amount of wealth. This is according to this study again, the Brookings Institute, as the average Black family, making it more difficult for Black businesses to withstand economic shocks. And when you look at access to financial institutions and markets, this is a huge impetus of why many of our businesses are not able to sustain themselves. In the study, it talked about 7% of white-owned businesses secured loans in their first year, whereas only 1% of Black businesses did. And not being able to secure loans or have access to lending institutions or markets really impacts if you're trying to get lines of credits, family and friends. We don't have that type of wealth, and many times access to loans. So as with COVID, if you don't have these relationships, which we will bring out further, you're not able to even get access to the PPP money. So I want to stop there and go to introducing our esteemed panels, because I think our panel, these guys are not only, they are leaders in our community, they have a wealth of information. And I just want to start off by just giving a little bit of background about who they are. So Erica Henderson is one of our panelists. She has more than 17 years of experience building strategic alliances for progressive change in disinvested communities and promoting inclusive growth in the St. Louis region to minimize social and economic challenges. She is the Executive Director of the St. Louis Promise Zone and Vice President of Community Investment and Real Estate at the St. Louis Economic Development Partnership, where she's forged and cultivated strong relationships in North St. Louis City and North St. Louis County. Erica has graduate degrees in public policy and business administration with an emphasis in finance and is a lifelong learner and avid reader. She is also currently a doctoral candidate for heritage leadership and participatory culture and social justice. So thank you, Erica, for joining us. Next, Christy Maxfield. She is the president and CEO of Purpose First Advisors, which her organization works with small businesses to help them identify and prioritize business strategies and tactics, help them make mission critical decisions, and adopt operational practices designed to achieve revenue and profitability goals. Purpose First is also committed to advancing racial and gender equity and entrepreneurship. Christy's background, she brings a decade of business coaching as well as her own experience as a business owner. I think this is her third venture, I believe, to collaborate relationships with owners who are focused on building successful companies. She's also my co-host, that's why I said second venture, on our Entrepreneurially Thinking podcast. And her background, she has a master's in business administration as well as a bachelor's in political science. Thank you, Christy. Gabriela is originally from Mexico and was inspired by her own experience growing up as an immigrant in the United States. Gabriela has a passion and commitment to help others. Now back in St. Louis, Gabriela finds her voice helping small business owners achieve their dreams as a business counselor, which she works in that capacity at the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. And through her podcast, Authentico, that podcast empowers and showcases bilingual Latinx professionals and small business owners. She is also in business with her husband, and they run their Mexican restaurant, Don Emiliano's, in O'Fallon, Missouri. Gabriela holds a bachelor's degree in marketing and an MBA as well. And last but not least, our gentleman on the panel we are so happy to have is Kevin Wilson. Kevin is the Executive Director of the Small Business Empowerment Center, which serves as a one-stop shop to help urban entrepreneurs start and grow their own business enterprises. For 20 years, also been an SBA technical assistance provider specializing in issues dealing with the urban core. He received his undergraduate and master's degree from the master's degree, and he is a certified economic development finance professional with the National Development Council. He's a certified SBA 504 loan packager from the National Association of Development Companies, and is a graduate, of course, of a Leadership St. Louis here in 2004. So I want to thank all of our panelists for joining us here today, for spending your morning here educating our audience. And again, this webinar is sponsored by Technology Partners, and Kitty Academy. I want to also encourage our audience to please remember to submit your questions via the chat, and we'll try to answer a few of them as we move through this conversation. So just to review the topics of discussion here, we are going to split our conversation between two topics. The first one is funding, specifically SBA, and we're also going to talk about other funds and how do you shore up your business. The second piece of this conversation will be talking about business resiliency. What's the current state of the market look like? What are the challenges? What type of coaching is available? And how do you transition or look at getting back to work? So we're going to jump in from there. So I'm going to start with Kevin. Kevin, you are our guy with regards to SBA and all there is around SBA and especially PPP. Can you do several things for us? Can you recap the second round of the Payroll Protection Loan Program? Are there any additional stimulus package funding options from SBA and other organizations? and potentially discuss non-financial benefits of the stimulus package that might exist, other tax incentives. Kevin.
Thank you, Cheryl. So, the second round of SBA's PPP and economic injury disaster loans came out. Just a few statistics on the second round. I think there was around 32,000 payroll protection program loans made in the state of Missouri. That equaled up to around $1.6 billion. This focus on the second round was a lot focused on smaller banks and smaller businesses. So it was a lot more small deals done on the second round versus the first. As everybody heard in the news, most of the big small businesses got those loans and some other larger organizations. This second round definitely was focused on smaller businesses. And so you saw the average loan somewhere below 200,000, something like that. So a lot more done in the smaller markets. However, there's still a lot of small businesses that have not gotten access to the PPP. And so, a lot of organizations, mine included, are working with a lot of small businesses to help them gain access to the PPP. Also with the, economic injury disaster loan, that was also refunded with the second round of the CARES Act. Unfortunately, only the ones that are in the queue already will be funded, before this month, before May. So they're working on the ones that were already in the queue. A lot of small business owners are starting to get their $10,000 checks in the mail, or in some cases a little less than 10,000 on the advance. Also on the second round, there is a focus on agriculture businesses because on the first round of EIDL, a lot of ag-based businesses did not get access. And there's also an emphasis on faith-based organizations for them to get access to both the PPP and the EIDL. After this second round is exhausted, there is, rumors on the streets that there will be additional money to be, allocated by Congress. However, once again, that's just a rumor, and we hope that is some more money that will be coming out. I think there are also some opportunities that will be happening from a state perspective and local municipality perspective. I know that HUD and EDA are both those federal agencies are allocating money to local municipalities to put together local loan funds and things like that. We're still a few months out before that actually hits the streets, but I think there'll be some additional opportunities for small business owners to access cash.
Thank you. Lakeisha?
Thank you, Kevin. Can you tell us what you're seeing, Erica, and share some information regarding some of those other funding options that Kevin alluded to?
Absolutely. So good morning again, everyone. We are seeing a tremendous amount of businesses that are seeking assistance through whether it is financial assistance, technical assistance, or just navigating the process. So we are really working with businesses to ensure that they are participating in all of the variety of resources that are available to them. So whether it's grants or loans or it's tax credits, we want to make sure that businesses locally are prepared. It is our job as economic development agency to make sure that you are sustainable. So the services that we offer are free to you. We want to make sure that you are taking advantage of them. For us at the partnership, we have a small business resource loan fund that's a $5,000 0% interest loan that we have been deploying in both city and county. In addition to that, we identified funds to do a small grant program. So for our sole proprietors, hairdressers, barbers, your gig workers, we've identified opportunities to make sure that you are supported as well. In addition to those things, we are working with Chrissy Maxfield along with Kevin Wilson to ensure that businesses have the technical support that is necessary. We are seeing that many of our businesses do not have their back office in order, and we need you to have your office in order so that you qualify for all of the funding opportunities that are available. I'm talking about that your taxes are current, your business license, that you're good with the Secretary of State. These barriers hinder us from assisting you to qualify for some of the programming that will allow you to recoup some of the downtime, down resources that you are experiencing during this time. As Kevin mentioned, there are some federal fundings that will be put in place to assure that businesses have access to other loan programs that are long-term. So Economic Development Administration and HUD are also working to pull together some resources for further revolving loan programs that we have here locally now for the city of St. Louis and for St. Louis County. I would also say for businesses that are in the county receives $173 million from the CARES Act. They allocated $17.5 million to go towards businesses that were in St. Louis County to assist them with PPE and other opportunities to open back up as we are on this journey of reopening starting May the 18th. So if you are in St. Louis County, I would advise you to go to stlcorona.com to get more information about this grant opportunity. Also on the city side, the city receives $35 million from the CARES Act. And so the city is working currently to identify areas that they can further support businesses through this opportunity. You will see starting tomorrow that the Community Development Block Grant application will be on the street for the city of St. Louis, which is also an opportunity to get some further support. But again, I would encourage all businesses to participate in the variety of training and webinars like this one. So it is our hope that you get something from each of the sessions that we all are previously participating in. We had a joke before the meeting started. This is the first webinar of the day, but we're all committed to ensuring your success. Your success is the region's success. Now more than ever, we are recognizing that this pandemic is demonstrating a number of inequities that are experienced in our community. So our Black businesses, our women-owned businesses, our foreign-born and immigrant-owned businesses. And so we're in conversations with banks to say, if it's not a crisis, how do we always have resources available for these small businesses? Mm-hmm. You know, we shouldn't have to have experiencing challenges as this one in order to have resources available. We need access to capital, access to the opportunities, access to resources, and access to contracts. And so we are collectively working on those issues. The last thing that I'll point out is that if you go to our website, which is stlpartnership.com, you will see a variety of resources, and we want to make sure that you're also taking advantage of the new employer tax credits. So those are for your sick and family leave, child care, and if you're taking care of people, your family members that are experiencing coronavirus symptoms, there's tax credits available for you to submit for your staff. And so some of these are up to $10,000. Some of them are up to $5,000 given the Medicare payments that you are doing for your employees. So you have the sick and family leave, and the other one is called the employee retention credit. So if you go to our website, again, stlpartnership.com, you will see the briefings from the IRS and kind of the steps in the process that you can take to take advantage of those tax credits.
Thank you, Erica. I have entered Erica, stlpartnership.com in the chat for everyone. And what was the other place you told us to go? Is it STL Corona or is it?
stlcorona.com, and this is the $15,000 grant that is going to businesses in the county as a whole. And I would advise, if you are applying to those funds, I would say also email the council person for that district. Introduce yourself to say, I am XYZ business. I serve X number of people in your district, because the council will make a determination on who gets funding for their particular community, and each of them receive $2.5 million to do so. So just a little insight that you should introduce yourself to them as well.
Absolutely, that's perfect, Erica. You're talking about what we want to talk about today too, which is the importance of those relationships, those valuable business relationships. But jump right in there, Cheryl.
No, I was just going to say, this is all important information. I hope everybody was taking notes, because between Kevin and Erica, you're seeing what the opportunities are on the federal level, and then what's available on the local level. And I think Erica brought out some really good points of it, and Lakeisha did. This all begins with relationships. I know we're all busy working in our businesses and on our businesses, but you've got to put your head up, because you don't get access unless you put your head up and people start to understand who you are and what you do. So I think our next panelist is going to be, really important to share some of the insights. Gabriella, if you could talk to us about the business owners that you're working with, what you're seeing, what are their needs, highlighting what are the things you tell these businesses to get in order, because I think Erica brought this out really brightly. You got to get your back house in order. If you don't get your back house in order, your back office operations in order, it's going to be very, very difficult for you to navigate getting a banking relationship, getting other relationships that can help you move your business forward. So Gabriella?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Cheryl, for having me, and hello, everybody. I'm really excited to be here and share with you. I mean, obviously, the entrepreneurs that I work with at the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce and also with the Vasa Foundation have many of the same obstacles that other entrepreneurs have, but they also do have unique challenges due to the fact that they don't maybe have those relationships in the ecosystem. So when Erica talks about introducing yourself, telling the district person who you are, those type of things are very important, not just for this grant, but just in general. And that goes back to something I heard recently about how this that we're going through right now is the pause that refreshes. So take a minute and think about what that means. That means that you're paused, but you're not supposed to just be sitting there waiting for the money to drop in your lap. This is the time for us to do all those back of the house things that maybe were not done. The accounting, the books, the processes. Many of us, myself included at the restaurant, realized there was a gap in our online platforms. So this is really a good time to reinvest in our business and really look at those things that maybe we were putting off that now need to be done right away in order to survive. So what's our vision for recovery? This is the time to not be shy. You need to reach out. There are so many support organizations. And I mean, honestly, for a lot of the businesses I work with, the PPP was really not an option. There's no point in getting into debt for a portion to be possibly, I mean, we don't even know right now that things change every single day, whether it will be forgiven or not, for employees that maybe you don't have. So honestly, that was not the best option. I do think that the city with the loan that Erica referenced is a great option, zero interest. I realize not everybody wants to take out a loan, but zero interest at this point is better than nothing. The county has come out with additional information, but what are some of the things that we can do internally right now? How can we cut cost? How can we adjust our mindset? Because this is a long time thing. I mean, even though the county in St. Charles has already opened, but May 18th is like the go-to date. I mean, nothing's going to change that day. It's not going to be a miraculous new day and we're going to find new opportunity. We really need to work at it. So our mindset has to be right. We have to get out into the community and reach out to people like Kevin and all the other business support organizations, whether it's a chamber or maybe an industry association that can provide additional guidance for our businesses and for how we're going to survive going forward. So some additional funding sources, I would say, are definitely the associations. I know the Restaurant Association has been very active here in Missouri, as well as the national one for restaurants and the food businesses, but also like the local beauticians and the barbers and those type of industries are really important. Definitely the back of the house, if you haven't gotten your accounting done, make sure you're looking at it and not just sending it off to someone else to do it for you, but understand your numbers. Really look and see, what's my balance sheet telling me? What are my income statements telling me? Because if new programs come up in the next month or in the next 6 months, like I said, this is a long-term thing. If those things aren't ready, you still won't be able to apply, even if the money's there. Even if Kevin has a check right in his hand made out to Don Emiliano's for me, if I don't have the documents that he needs, there is nothing that he can do to help me as much as he wants. I would say that for the people that did receive the PPPs, At the end of the day, the forgiveness piece is decided by the lender. So again, make sure you have a great relationship with that lender. Truly understand what their capacity is. And so that's another thing that's really a big gap in our communities, right? Unbanked. How do we go from, I have a bank account that I just set up at the last minute, but I don't necessarily know anyone at my bank. Reach out to us. I mean, we've all been very vocal and on all the different platforms saying, let me know what you need. I can help. I don't have all the answers, but definitely I can call anyone on this panel and say, hey, Lakeisha, I need you to connect me with someone for an entrepreneur. So I think that the best advice that I could give right now is don't be shy, but know what you need. I can't help you if you don't know what I can help you with. Mm-hmm. A lot of times I hear people say, I just need capital. But when I push further and say, well, what are you going to use it for? How much do you need? It's very difficult for people to tell me that. So let's really change our mindset about I'm waiting for the money to drop and look at the internal processes that we maybe need to adjust, as well as our asking for help. Like I said, this is not the time to be shy. This is the perfect time to grab the phone, put it out on social media, let people know what you need. But first, you need to understand what those needs are.
Mm-hmm. Those are all some really, really good points, Gabriella. I think that for many of our folks, understanding your numbers is the biggest thing. Yeah, you might have your accountant doing your taxes, because I certainly don't do my taxes myself, but you better understand where, what are your financial indicators? What can you pull back on? How can you manage your cash burn? How can you manage and get through 2 months or 6 months or a year? And how do you do that? So I want to thank you for that advice. That's really good. I'm going to turn that back over to Lakeisha, and we're going to go into our second topic with business resiliency. Okay, so we are advancing into our
I got it. my computer, Cheryl, I fixed it, but okay, it's still not fixed. So our panelists have shared some great information to start with. We talked about funding, getting to know your back office and managing it well. Relationships kept coming up. Everybody said something about relationships. Mm-hmm. And then Gabriella closed it out with knowing what you need, even before you show up to ask. Know what you need and be okay with getting familiar with the resources and the people who can help you with that. And all of that takes us nicely into the next portion of this, which is business resiliency. And we're going to jump right in with the current state of the market. So Christy, what type of businesses are you supporting and what industries do they represent? And then tell us how you're coaching your clients to their current reality.
Thanks, Lakeisha. I'm talking with hairstylists, daycare owners, heating and cooling companies, counselors, folks who own gyms and personal training, health-related, nail salons, tax services, consulting, travel and entertainment. It kind of is across the board. Wow. And they're really all dealing with different things. A lot of them have a really good grasp on their current reality. When we talk about our friends who are hairstylists and in daycare, and I'm sure, and even with if the conversation I had with a gentleman who does HVAC and is on job sites, PPE is really a challenge right now. The rising cost because of the scarcity and the volume that is needed. When you put that together with a lot of the new requirements are limiting the number of customers that can be in a space at a given time and the number of staff who have to be available to provide services and to be in compliance with safety regulations, it's a double whammy. So opening back up, whether you're a restaurant that has to keep people 6 feet apart, or you're a daycare that has to have a dedicated teacher to greet the students and escort them to the classroom, or you're a hairstylist who can't have one person getting a cut while another person's getting a color, this is going to be a really hard scenario. So we're talking about the realities of what it means to reopen, and then also the hurdles that are keeping them from actually being able to get some of the relief that is being offered. And other folks have touched on that, you know, having the paperwork in order, particularly for individuals who are sole proprietors and haven't been paying themselves regularly. They aren't doing a regular documentation of their owner's draw. That is very problematic in being able to demonstrate what you've typically been taking home, and having a paper trail that will allow banks and others to feel comfortable that you are in fact using funds the way they needed to be used. So it kind of covers the gamut. Sometimes we're just talking about how hard this is and how frustrating. So there's a lot of just commiserating and saying, you know, this is scary and uncharted, and then realizing that the help is great, and sometimes it's not enough, and sometimes it's for things that aren't the most pressing on the list of the business owner. You know, business owner wants to bring back folks, and if the money is restricted to payroll and they can't bring them back right now, you know, and it's PPE that's keeping them from bringing back, it becomes, there are some catch-22 scenarios, right? So thankfully, to date, I've been able to offer folks a number of different resources and help them get things in order. But there's going to be increasingly, I think, fewer options for outside infusions of cash. And it's going to really rely on if and how you were able to pivot. Not everybody's going to be able to pivot. Not everybody's going to be able to figure out how to generate revenue, given all the restrictions and the challenges and just the nature of their work. Some will, and those are great conversations to have. And for those who can't, then we are going to need to figure out as a community what we're going to do to support them and help them take care of their families.
I think that's a really important point. And I want all of you guys, you know, if you feel the need to jump in, all of our panelists, you can always respond on these questions that we're asking. But I think pivoting is going to be something that I think many of our folks wrote questions around. How do I pivot? How do I know when it's the right time to pivot? And I'm sure we'll get to that question, but I think that's a huge thing. Other panelists, what industries or what businesses are you guys talking to, business owners in the different types of industries, maybe that Christy didn't mention?
You know, I think a lot of the construction trades, whether it's plumbers, roofers, you know, carpenters, they're having some challenges with projects, you know, slowing down. You know, there are other options out there, you know, there's new projects coming out. But still, you know, the construction trades always had challenges in terms of capitalization and you know, and cash flow. And so, you know, they've got some roadblocks ahead. However, I think with some, you know, resourceful thinking, and I think this is what Christy was leading to also, is that it's, you know, you have to, you know, not give into the fear, but, you know, keep a resourceful mind. You know, you know, I think, you know, I go back to that movie Shawshank Redemption, you know, where, you know, Morgan Freeman was talking about Andy, you know, he was in prison, but prison wasn't in him. And so I would tell everybody on the call is, you know, yeah, you're in a pandemic, but don't let the pandemic be in you. Stay resourceful, keep a resourceful mind, think positively, figure out how to pivot, how to innovate, and I think you'll be all right.
Okay. Any other comments from the panelists?
A real quick question about resiliency for the panelists. What are some of the characteristics of resilient businesses that you are seeing? So the businesses that you are talking to, and I know Kevin has some good stories because we talk about the time, but those businesses that are showing their resiliency are going to be able to continue, have been able to capture those funds, do know what the plan going forward looks like.
I would say for me, some of them were prepared to apply for the funding, but more than anything, I'd have to say it's back to that mindset, right? They realized that this is something different and new, and they've leaned into it, but they're also making sure that they're asking for help. They're not trying to be the expert. They're not afraid right now. They're wanting to reach out and ask for the help, always looking for learning opportunities, how can they pivot what they currently have. I'm sure that there are a number of businesses that have flourished during this time because there's all these gaps that we're currently seeing now. So I definitely think that the mindset is a big part of it, and then continuing to ask for help. And then, like I said earlier, don't be stuck where you are right now. What can you do to improve your business on the back end so that the recovery is different? We have to start thinking also about that. It's not just I'm in this mess right now, but what does success look like for me in 6 months or in 2 years? And it could be something totally different.
Absolutely. I just want to add that for those who have applied for the PPP program, if you didn't receive funds in the first round, we still have lenders locally that have the ability to process your application. So my apologies for any of the bigger banks that are on the call, but sometimes our smaller businesses get lost in the shuffle, right? Because our bigger banks have this enormous volume of applications that they are receiving. So if you would reach out to us, we want to connect you to some of the local smaller banks, Midland Bank, Midwest Bank, and Justine Peterson, and others. So if I missed some of you all that are on here, my apologies, but some of the smaller banks have the ability to make sure that you can still submit an application for funding. On the other side of that, if you receive funding from 2 different applications that you submitted, you can only accept one. Do not put yourself in a position that you would have, cause more issues for you than you need. I would also say it's important to track how you are spending those funds, because you have to be accountable for those. I'm gonna shout out Corey Elliott from CMT Roofing, who put together a spreadsheet to help other businesses track their PPP dollars, so that you are making sure that you are accountable to all of the funds that you are receiving, so that you don't have to give anything back. And so I think that those are just really important things to know, that there are still resources available. So even at the local, regional, or state level, there are still opportunities for you to participate. But everything that we're saying is that your house has to be in order, and let us help you get that in order. Whether it is, let's get on a payment plan for your taxes, or let's talk about the small things, the business license that's typically $100, or getting correct with the Secretary of State, which is relatively minimal as well. But those small things are so critically important. And I'm gonna say one of, I think Oprah says that she signs her own checks. It goes back to what Gabriella is saying. You can have all of the accountants in the world, but you have to know where your business stands financially for yourself. At any given moment, if you wake up in the middle of the night, you ought to be able to say, I'm here, and I'm here because of this. And if this happens, we'll be in trouble. Right. But those things are so critically important as you look up, if you're thinking about growth. So we are here now, we are responding now in this recovery stage, but quickly we will shift to resiliency, sustainability, and how do we move forward? Is there an area for my business to grow during this pandemic? There's conversations on, all of this time, most people have been at home for 8 weeks. We will see a rebirth of entrepreneurs when we come out of this. And so you want to make sure that you're thinking about diversifying your income from your business. If your business is doing one lane of opportunity, is there something that you can do a slight tweak that opens up other opportunities? And Cheryl, I'm going all the way back to when the Equity Collective started. So it's opportunities for us to just think about our business differently, participate in broader conversations, and be welcoming of conversations from TA providers who do this every day, and their main purpose really is to make sure that you are successful.
Absolutely. Thank you. I think that when we talk about challenges, I think all of you guys brought this out. Do not be afraid to reach out. There are 4 people on this panel, including Lakeisha and myself, who are all part of our resource organizations here in our community. St. Louis has a wealth of resources. Many of them are free. I think everybody on this call has access to free resources or is a free resource. So do not be afraid. If you don't understand what the heck a balance sheet is or what it looks like, this is a time, I think like many of our panelists have said, this is a time for you to retool, to start to grow your knowledge, to start to think about how to reposition your business. So I just want to thank Erica for that input, because I think that's really important. Other challenges many our panelists are seeing out there from business owners in the community.
Cheryl, it's Christy. Gabriella made a really good point that the business may not look the same moving forward.
Yes.
And so some people will have to decide whether or not they want to continue to be business owners, and then they'll have to decide which business opportunities they move forward with. And so being that mindset piece is also about, I think there are going to be resilient entrepreneurs whose businesses may not survive as they exist today. So separating the resiliency of the individual from the resiliency of the business, you may not be able to go back and do the business you used to do. And you may be able to do a new business moving forward, depending on the new opportunities you see and the ability to adapt. So I did want to make that distinction. The other thing is, I've talked with some entrepreneurs and I've suggested some of the techniques that I've seen other clients use, and sometimes the response is, oh, I thought they were doing those videos on LinkedIn because they were bored. I was like, no, that's actually a direct selling strategy. That's a content development strategy. That's a relationship building and prospecting strategy. You know, they're like, I've backburnered my website, and I say, yes, that's great, but your Facebook page isn't up to date either, and neither is your LinkedIn, and those two are free. So take the free resources that are out there and make sure they're as robust as possible, and that they don't just tell people the thing that you think they want to know, but they tell the folks everything you're capable of doing, and give examples of your past work, and that this is the time to be over communicating value. So in the problems you're uniquely situated to help solve, how do you communicate that you understand that how the problems exist, who they exist for, and that you've already thought through solutions, and provide some of those solutions to people in the form of digital content so they can start to derive value from them right away before they ever pay you a dime, and then come to you as a trusted resource moving forward. I mean, particularly folks in industries that may entirely be wiped out for the foreseeable future. If you're doing travel, if you're doing large group entertainment type settings, it's going to be a really long time before those things come back. So what does your expertise allow you to do in terms of helping your clients move into a totally virtual event experience? What new skills do you need to learn to be able to do that? I know people who've become experts in 6 weeks on things they were not experts on 6 weeks ago. So all of that, and then the importance of selling, because I can come up with a lot of great ideas on how to reach your target market, identify your target market, differentiate your product or service, pivot your product or service, meaning reposition it in the market in new ways to new people. But if you're not comfortable selling, or you don't have selling resources, this is the time where the ability to market and sell is going to be incredibly important. And so some of us aren't built that way, and some of us have not invested in that part in our business when we realize we're not the seller or the marketer. But I do think that that's going to be a critically important differentiator for folks moving forward. The last thing I wanted to share is this may be the time to partner. So if your firm does X and my firm does Y, and together we can go out and go after a whole nother market, or we can have more strength in the market so that we're bigger and we can attract a different type of contract, or we can service a different type of area. It doesn't have to be a you buy me, I buy you. There's lots of different ways to partner. And so thinking creatively about who could you be doing business with from a partnership standpoint can open up new possibilities too. It's also just really hard to see these things when it's just you and you're alone. And so that's why, I mean, if you can get tapped into your trusted advisor network or one of us and have these conversations, it's easier to see things, for us to see things, and for people outside your business to see things than it is for you.
Yeah, I think those are really good points. And our slide, we should be on our next slide with coaching, because Christy actually introduced that. I know, but I think this is so important. This is getting to that pivoting and the conversations that Christy just talked about. This is a time for everyone to be looking at the market and almost being futuristic about what do they see past this pandemic. Because while chaos is going on, you need to be laser focused on where can I make my next move. And I think that, it's like Christy said, some businesses are not going to survive, but that doesn't mean you don't survive. You can pick up and develop another business, that which might mean, you know, you need a new skill or something else. Christy will laugh because I just joined Facebook, which I was never on Facebook. But you know, there are different reasons for that, but I think you need to be looking at how do you position your business. So coaching, Kevin, we know your we always laugh when we talked to you before and said you really coach your clients to a recession, and the clients that you were coaching prior to COVID were already set up, ready to go, and got their PPP money. Talk to us about how do you coach to a recession?
You know, right after, you know, 2008 and 2009, there was a lot of businesses, particularly in, you know, in under-resourced communities, they just crashed and burned. And from then on, you know, and especially through, you know, the Ferguson riots and downturn locally in terms of the economy, you know, I started to coach a lot of clients, you know, assuming that some catastrophe or bad event was going to happen in the economy. And so what you end up doing is, you know, as a small business owner, is you start thinking about the worst case scenario when things are good, right? And so, you know, and a lot of these things have already been mentioned, from, you know, having backroom your accounting together, a good relationship with your banker. You're thinking about, what does my business look like when there's a downturn in the economy? And so those businesses that were prepared, and Lord knows, I don't think I ever coached a client to a pandemic, but you know, but those who were ready, their online game was on point. They had a great website. They had a customer list. They were able to reach out to the current customers and re-engage. They're doing pretty good, right? They were able to connect with their banker and get the money that they needed immediately. They were able to reach out to their customers immediately and tell them, I'm here, I'm still in business, I'm still ready to do, you know, transact business with you. So we try to make sure that, you know, we're coaching them to these kinds of situations. And the time to prepare for them is when things are great, right? And so constantly thinking about that roadmap to success, or in this case, that roadmap to recovery.
That's great, great.
So other coaches, how are you coaching to, maybe you don't use the term recession, but how are you coaching your clients through difficulties? Because whether it's a recession, a pandemic, war, I mean, there's always something going on that's going to impact the way the market responds to business. So how are you addressing that?
For me, I would just say it's that hard conversation that has to be had. And so it's to tell you that there's some work to do in order for us to get to where we're going, and really helping businesses focus in on the most pressing issues before we kind of just spread you too thin. What we are seeing is that businesses are fearful of applying to all of these different opportunities. They don't know if they qualify. Have the conversations with us so we can assist you in that dynamic. For me, the biggest thing is just that the house has to be together because I got text messages last night from businesses who taxes are not together. If your taxes are not paid and you're not on a payment plan, you didn't qualify for PPP. You didn't qualify for any of the local opportunities as well. So it really put businesses in a bad position. Also, just how the businesses are structured. We've got some that are doing 1099s and potentially should have been doing W-2s to make sure that they were able to benefit from this. So it's taking this opportunity, this tragedy, and turning it into an opportunity to understand how to properly structure our businesses in a way that position us for success. I also really like what Christy said about partnerships and collaboration, working with one another to ensure that you're stronger together. We talk to minority contractors about this all the time. When you're going after some of these very large contracts, sometimes you don't have the bandwidth. You have to ensure that your net is fortified in a way that gives you opportunity to be a real force to be considered on some of these projects. And for me, it makes more sense to partner than not to get the opportunity at all. Absolutely. So it's making sure that you are positioned to be successful, given all of these, current opportunities that will present themselves. It is my hope that we regionally hold our banks, our CDFIs, our government more accountable to say you must prioritize with intentionality sorry, my battery running low. With intentionality, our communities of color, our economically undervalued neighborhoods, our Black businesses, our brown businesses, our immigrant, our foreign-born, and our women-owned businesses. Until we do that, to ensure that we can position you further for success with opportunity and accessibility to some of the capital and the resources that are available, we will not get there. And so it takes this collective. It takes businesses being positioned and ready for business. So we talking about, we got all these businesses, we got to have businesses that have their house in order, that are ready to participate too. And so I just think that your success is our success. It is the region's success. So we are here to help you the best way that we can.
Absolutely.
Let me ask this. Lakeisha,
so you alluded to the fact that you were.
Can't hear you.
So you alluded to the fact that you were, my computer's being crazy now. You alluded to the fact that you were getting text messages last night from clients. And I get that. I'm sure everybody on this call gets those text messages and those emails. And it takes us right into the question about how are you continuing to communicate with those businesses that you work with, as well as how are you advising them to communicate with their customers?
Is this to me directly or to everybody?
To you.
I would say I'm here. So I'm working 85 hours a week to make sure that businesses are able to get what they need. And I would say that everyone on this panel is doing the same thing. And others that are not reflected in this panel, everyone is giving all they got to this opportunity. And I would tell you, if I help you, help somebody else, or connect, don't give them my phone number, but connect them to where the opportunities are and what I'm saying. Share my email address, or share the website, or just pass the information along. The information is not for you. You're not going to be the only one to get a grant or to get a loan. That does not make you successful. You want to make sure that you are sharing information so that you can be the recipient of other information as it is flowing, because all of the resources are constantly changing. And we saw that with PPP and the IDO early on. And so I would say share what you have, share insight that you have to make sure that others are just as successful as you are. You are your own greatest competition.
Right. And I think, Gabriella, you have a unique, perspective, because we have a lot of foodpreneurs. So how are you advising these guys who are, because I think they're for people who might have to think about doing business differently, these guys are going to be hit very, very hard, where many of them might not exist going in the future. How are you advising business owners, and what kind of questions are you seeing, not just from foodpreneurs, but in the immigrant community?
Cheryl, that's a great question. I really try to stress in my initial conversations that every business is differently. So we see a lot, especially in the minority communities, that if such and such is doing something, then automatically you want to start doing it. But really evaluating is, does this make sense for my business? So for example, St. Charles County, as I mentioned to you all earlier, which is where the restaurant is, opened on May the 4th. There are restaurants that opened because the next day, Cinco de Mayo, was going to be one of the biggest income generating days of the year. But for me, I was not willing to take the risk. I was not willing to take the risk that now I would be responsible for my employees, for the hygiene and sanitation at my restaurant, and then for the customers that I have no idea where they have been or what they have been doing. So really, it's not a one size fits all. It's really important to try to understand what is your capability, and then also what risk are you willing to take. The Cinco de Mayo, just as an example, for me at the restaurant, we've been doing DoorDash, which has its issues because of the high commissions and whatnot, but we want to continue to keep the restaurant active. We didn't think, I don't know why, to not have DoorDash delivery open that day. In less than 1 hour, we got 250 orders through the DoorDash application because we were the only restaurant in town that was doing DoorDash. Even though we closed it at 5:55, you know, before the rush hour, we were backed up 2 hours just with orders. So that's a whole nother chaos that now my reputation is at stake. The quality of my food is at stake. People are mad. Like sometimes, especially in the food industry, I don't know about other industries, but I feel like people are more mad and mean to me in my restaurant during the pandemic than they were before, because they're not thinking that if you went in person, you would have a wait.
Right.
So, you know, they placed their order. And so that's why I'm saying that everybody has to do what is good for them and the risk that they're willing to take. I never anticipated 250 orders in less than an hour, plus the ones that were coming in on the phone.
Wow.
And so for food entrepreneurs, it's really important to understand, you know, what are the tools that you're going to use to stay in business if you're not going to open? If you are going to open, and I asked the county executive on the call yesterday, what are some of the processes as an employer that I need to have in place for my employees? Do I have to take their temperature? Do I have to provide masks and gloves? So all of these things come into play depending on if you're a truck, a food truck, a brick and mortar, or maybe you're a catering company that's kind of doing stuff at the markets. Really being conscious of also what the local legislations are.
And that's a lot to keep up with. When we talk about going back to work, which is Gabriella, thank you for opening that conversation up. There's going to be a lot that business owners have to think about. And I think the biggest thing is folks are talking about liability. There is a cadre of litigation attorneys waiting for companies to open up. And if you are not protecting your clients, they are coming after businesses and big businesses as well as small businesses. So,
Hey, Cheryl.
Sure, Erica?
Nope.
Or who
I
jumped
just wanted to say that the mayor is hosting a webinar next week on May the 13th about returning to work. And it's a reopening your business series. Well, not series, it's a one-time thing. It's next week, May the 13th. And then also North County Inc. is also hosting one, and North County Inc. is tomorrow at 1 o'clock, and they have the county health director, they have some HR professionals, an attorney, and then Brian Hall from Explore St. Louis.
Yeah.
And I believe that's the same lineup with the city respective persons for Mayor Cruisins next week. So definitely participate in the different Zooms so that you can hear what they are saying about reopening, because I believe you are very correct in saying there's some attorneys waiting for you know, issues to arise.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Erica. So guys, what is the future? We want you to be futurist for a minute. What does the future look like for many of the industries that the businesses that you coach are in?
I'll go first. I see everybody's faces. I mean, to be honest, it's scary. It's scary to see where we are right now, and it's scary to see that we don't know what the future will hold. Like I said, for my restaurant, if I decide to open today or May the 19th after the county does, and somebody gets sick, I made it through the crisis, but I failed afterwards. So I think that we have to be very conscious and maybe sit down and make a plan for our own businesses of what does the next 6 months look like? What does the next year look like? The next 2 years? I mean, they're saying that this is going to be an economic recession that we're going to have a difficult time coming from. So it's not just our businesses, but also making sure that we're looking at what are our personal investments, priorities look like? What are our personal debts look like, and how will that be affected by the fact that we no longer have the business? I want to be positive and say I've seen people, you know, that are doing really well. A couple of my construction guys are doing amazing, like they're like tripled their volume, but that's not the case for everybody. So really sitting back again and looking at your own business and making a plan for what that will look like. So reach out to any one of us so that we could sit with you. I mean, every industry is going to be different. Every industry will roll out and start really producing and ramping up sales at their own pace, especially the service industries, because we are at risk, liability of, you know, even though the infection wouldn't come from my restaurant, the fact that someone there had it makes it as if it did. And so what is your plan? You know, do you have a plan for an emergency? Let's say someone does get sick. What's my plan? So I think that I mean, it's hard to be a futurist, but I would say we definitely need to start looking at risk aversion and what risk will look like and what our risk tolerance is going forward, and sit down and put a plan together, at least some kind of document, a process that will help you through, especially if you have employees. This is going to be detrimental. But to really sit down and say, okay, if I look at my workforce, how many people do I need to get back up right now? In the next 6 months, how many more people do I think I'll need? The same thing with your vendors and your suppliers. I mean, I don't know about other industries, but I know for us, everybody hasn't been able to come through anymore at the restaurant. And so really being conscious of, now do I have to change my menu, or maybe I have to change my offerings, and you know, what is their expected returning back to the quote unquote normal look like, so that I could go back to that menu, or is this a pivot point for me? Maybe I don't offer that service anymore. So I mean, I think, like I said, it's scary. We're all scared, but we're all in this together, and the collaboration piece is going to be key, not just with other business owners, but with the service organizations that can help you. Sometimes, I know I can speak for Christy, because sometimes we give out hard advice, but I think in the end, people do love us because we're real.
Right. No, and I think when you talk about, depends on the industry that you're in, and maybe you guys can all, you know, Gabriella, thank you for giving your insights into the food industry, but there's other retail that change, just like what you talked about. You know, you're going to have constraint of people even coming into your business. What does other retail look like? And if you're not in retail, maybe Kevin, Christy, you guys can speak to, what do you think the future of, you know, looks like for many of our small business owners, or how should they be focused now, and how do they pivot? Maybe that's a better question. Can you talk to how do people go through the process of pivoting?
You know, Cheryl, I would, you know, before we talk about pivoting, I would just jump off from what Gabrielle was talking about, is that I think a serious conversation with your insurance agent would be a very prudent move.
Oh, yes.
Is to, you know, think about mitigating risk at this point, and what does, you know, worst case scenario look like, you know, in terms of, you know, someone getting sick, things like that. So think about, you know, have that conversation with your insurance agent about your employees as well as your customers, right? And then to the whole pivoting piece, I think one of those things every small business owner, entrepreneur needs to think about is not only the safety of your customers, but how you reducing their anxiety and fear about coming out and engaging with you as a small business owner. So I think that whole thinking through, how do I make my customers feel comfortable about coming to my place of business, and they feeling fully engaged, and that I have thought about your safety and I have thought about your customer experience. And so I think that has to go into your thought process in terms of pivoting.
I couldn't agree more. I think that communicating with your customers about what your business is doing, how this is impacting your business, they really don't understand usually. Like, I don't think about what it takes for Gabriella to put a meal on my table and what has to happen between point A and point B. I'm just there to enjoy good food, right?
And margaritas.
And margaritas, right. But really understanding that it's not just as simple as separating the tables 6 feet apart. There's a lot more that's going to go into this, and they can be your biggest advocates. Part of Erica's vision of our region really prioritizing these business owners means that all of our decision makers have to hear from them and from their constituents about what it takes to have vibrant small business communities, and making sure that what those needs are expressed and expressed often. One of the things that excites me about the county's grant application process is it is in everybody's best interest to reach out to their council person. And those council people should feel overwhelmed because there's a lot for them to learn and hear about what all of this takes. Because one of the things that this has proven to me is that most of our decision makers don't understand how the gig economy works. They don't understand how a lot of people make their money, and how to help us stay afloat. To Gabriella's point about running scenarios, you're probably running your business on the most basic QuickBooks free subscription or lowest dollar subscription. It's not going to let you do things like cash flow reports. It's time to pay for the next level up. It's time to go talk to somebody like Kevin or Gabriella or me about what is a financial projection, because that's not something you press a button on QuickBooks. It doesn't spit that report out. It's not in there. That's in your brain, and we got to put it in Excel, and we got to turn all of your ideas into financial assumptions. The cost of PPE alone is going to change how you do business, right? So what is that cost? Is it going to go up by 5%, 10%, 40%? Will it make sense to go back to work? Will you know that intuitively, but also will you know that definitively? Because I know I've got some customers who are generating work. Now they have to get their employees back to fulfill it. So that's a whole nother piece of the equation. Also planning for PR and communications. So if you can get out in front of it, like Kevin suggested, and be active in communicating to folks, that's better than waiting for something bad to happen and then try to figure out how to communicate all the things you tried to do so hard to make it safe for everybody. And pivoting is not a one size fit all. Pivoting is the ability to look at the area of the world that you do business in and see if there are new problems to solve, and if you have the capabilities to solve them, and if anybody will pay you to solve them. It's the same thing as starting your own business to the first time go around, right? You have to use that same lens. Are there problems I can solve? Will people pay me to solve them? There are not everybody's going to be able to say yes to that. Pivoting is not going to be everybody's ability, and there. So, but going through the exercise of asking those questions and then figuring out what makes sense to you. So it's, I wish I could say, do this, do this, do this, and you'll pivot. It's really not that simple. And you really do need somebody to walk through that process with you. And it is a process. Like, it's not a 5-minute phone call. It's not a 40-minute phone call. It's weeks and months of really evaluating what's going on and being able to make some really well-informed evidence-based decisions. So
That's some really good advice. Thank you, Christy. Any advice from other panelists around this topic of going back to work, and how do you look at the future? I mean, there have been some examples in our market where we've had folks who, you know, they pivoted from doing clothes manufacturing to face masks, but there's a lot of face masks now being developed, right? I think it's finding where can you make the most impact. You know, this goes back to looking at market trends. a lot of our beer distributors and distilleries quickly pivoted to making, sanitizer, hand sanitizer. But what's interesting, I just read, is that a lot of their batches of brew is now going to waste because they don't have they're not selling it. So, our other panelists, can you guys jump in about this going back to work? Any other advice that you can provide, especially like Christy said, this is not a one size fits all pivot. What are you seeing from companies out there and how are they pivoting?
I would just say make adjustments where necessary, don't feel bad that you have to tweak it along the way. So it's like drive the car while you're building the car, because things are ever changing, and so make sure that you are taking care of you are taking care of your staff, and then you are able to service your clients who are receiving whatever goods or services from you. But make adjustments where necessary. This is a new normal when we come out of this pandemic. So you want to make sure that if it's not working one way, you make some changes. As Gabriella said, she had no idea that she would receive that type of volume by opening up DoorDash. So whatever your DoorDash is for your business, think about it. Be futuristic, as Keisha said, or innovative, or talk to others or people that you could throw this in the group chat. What your business is, how do you pivot? And folks are willing to give you ideas. You will have to do the hard work of figuring it out, but be open to the creativity that will now be required as we go back into our everyday lives.
This is probably a obvious thing, but I think every small business owner who is on the call, definitely your local municipality, because each of them have slightly different rules concerning going back to work and opening up. So just make sure that you know what your current municipality is doing versus, St. Charles versus the county versus the city.
Yes, we don't want anybody going to jail.
Thanks for that, Kevin. We have a couple questions in the chat that, and they are mostly around funding, so.
Wait a minute, Keisha, before you do that, just one more ping on reopening. I think what Kevin said is really important because a lot of the rules have changed. So the fact that you can buy alcohol and drive away is something new. They're talking about how restaurants are able to do sidewalk service, which was something that you were not able to do in the past. So it is important to make sure that you check in with whoever your municipal or government leader is to know what the new rules and regulations will be so that you can adapt accordingly. So I'm sorry, go ahead.
So know the rules for the game you want to play. That makes perfect sense, and that's good feedback. So a couple questions that were in the chat that were around funding. I'll throw those out there. Erica and Kevin, please feel free to answer them if you can. If it takes more than a brief answer, if you'll provide me that answer, I'll share it when this deck goes out. But one of the first questions was, for solo entrepreneurs who have revenue but don't necessarily have staff, how does the PPP funding apply to them? What does that mean for them? My understanding is that they would potentially use the portion of the PPP funding that was for self-employed individuals, which would be unemployment, but the question is for you, so share.
I think this is one of the texts that Erica got last night.
Well, I
think it depends on your business structure. If you were if you were a LLC and operating as a sole proprietor, Schedule C, it definitely, you got to look at your Schedule C on line 31 and see if there was a profit. If there was no profit, then PPP is probably not an option. There's a top line that's revenue, but then you have to look at that bottom line on profit, and because that was the one that you would make the calculation on the PPP. However, economic entry disaster loan might be an option for you later down the line if that reopens, but be based on the business structure. So, it's going to be that answer.
We just lost you, Kevin.
I'm here.
There you go.
So I think that's, we can take any specific questions offline, but that would be my answer to, we'll have to look at it on a case by case basis with the, contractors.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Anything from you, Erica? Or did Kevin get it all?
Kevin got it. I just think it's about don't lie, be honest, because you don't want that to come back on you. And so if you didn't have revenue, let's talk about other opportunities that you do qualify for and that you can participate in. I just think that during this time, because there's so many new programs that are coming online and so quickly, I think that there's going to be a lot of auditing that happens on the back end.
That's very promising. Lakeisha, you have the list of other questions? Can't hear you if you're on.
The next question. The next question is not necessarily about funding, but it's more about what we kind of wrapped up a minute ago. And it basically asks, what do you see as the biggest hurdle businesses will face getting over COVID-19? Christy?
It depends. It depends on your industry. But right now, depending on your industry, some of your customer base and your customer base, they may not have jobs. And so your hurdle might just be that you could be open all day, every day, but the target market you have isn't spending money on the thing you do, right? It could be that your entire model was based on word of mouth and you don't have a strong digital infrastructure to replace that word of mouth. It could be that, like the construction industry, where your livelihood depends on bidding on jobs and the jobs have all been paused. That's the thing, is there's not going to be one hurdle. There's going to be a series, like the hurdling event. The very little I know about track and field is it's hurdle after hurdle after hurdle after hurdle, long before you get to the straight runway, right? And that's towards the finish line. So every time you move forward, that's why Kevin's recommendation of scenarios, best, worst, different. So it's not, a scenario just isn't like, hey, I get 250 orders, how will I handle the volume? It's, I get 250 orders while half my staff calls in sick, and there's a deluge, right? So it's raining cats and dogs. I have half my workforce, and I've got 18 times my orders. Go, right? Which is why building financial models requires some assistance, because you got to be able to plug in different variables and think them through.
Well, that's good. And I think what you both touched on is really important. COVID, post-COVID, and I just heard this on one of the business shows today. It's going to be dependent on how people spend their money, because a lot of people are out of work, or they're, furloughed or whatever. So people are holding on to their funds. So they are being very discriminate about how they spend their money. So I think going back to marketing and how you are differentiating your product or service to entice people to spend their money is going to be really, really important. Any other thoughts from our panelists?
Just one, I've done a lot of work with the Veterans Business Resource Center as well, and they did a survey recently, and you can find out the exact statistics from Darcella Craven. But they found that of the business owners who, after 5 years, were no longer in business, one of the things they reported not really liking was all the time they had to spend planning. And when they asked successful business owners who were in business after 5 years what they attributed their success to, they said planning. So if you're like, if you're not in it because the thing you do is part and parcel of who you are, having a skill and running the business that delivers the skill or service or product are different things. So be honest with yourself now too, right? If the planning that goes into running your business is not your thing, then this might be a time to really take a look at that too. Don't ignore your gut.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Erica, can you share the link for the May 13th webinar in the chat? You don't have the link?
Can't share it because I think I told y'all something that I shouldn't have said already. But
This is
it's coming. So say that's why I said, oh, stay tuned. It should be announced here in the next day or so, along with the registration link. So sorry about that, but it is next week in preparation of us opening on May 18th.
But see, that's why it's important for people to be on this webinar. You're getting early information that you wouldn't get.
And that's why I said this is that group. This is that group that we have
Yes.
information and we want you to have it. So we just share it and then we have to tell you to wait for it.
Right. Exactly. We have a question from Deborah James. Hey, Deborah. She's from Freddie Lee's Gourmet Sauce. I think everybody on this call knows Freddie Lee's Gourmet Sauce. She is asking, just for everybody here on the call, she says, we are a food manufacturing company and co-packing. My question is, we are looking to expand and move our location, but what advice about moving forward with this new venture? She also said, Christy, she'll be reaching out to you regarding advertising assistance because they're no longer able to do in-store sampling or sampling of the product because it is just very risky. So maybe somebody can take the first question about looking to expand and move and advice on moving forward with this new venture.
Well, I think Christy was, alluded to this earlier, is that, definitely think through the plan, right? The planning is key during this time, and that plan should think about all of the logistics that it's going to take for the expansion and what resources that you'll need and who needs to be involved in that. And so, planning is essential and vital during this time, and you need to think through all of the variables that will, come into play in these upcoming months.
I would echo that, Kevin. I think that planning is going to be key. And we've been focused a lot on access to capital in our small businesses, but we haven't really touched on the fact that we are entering, if we're not already, in an economic recession.
Mm-hmm.
So there are bigger things that are happening outside in the region and in the country and really the whole world that will be affecting a lot of everything that we do going forward. So as you think about expansion, you want to maybe ask yourself, is this still a good time to do that? You had planned to do it before, but due to the upcoming economic crisis, is this still a good time? Right. And if it is, then making sure that you have those projections in place so that you know that the money will come in so that it will make sense. I mean, when we talk about the largest unemployment in the history of the US, pretty much, what does that do to your sales that maybe you had planned on before? So I think that we have to look, that plan has to involve all the different forces and everything around us that's affecting the work that we want to do and the work that we are doing. So, I mean, the unemployment rate, economic downfall, what is that going to do to the possibility of you going to new markets where you still have the same number of customers that you thought you would? So I'm not trying to be negative, but I just want you to think through all those other things that will now impact you besides I have a great product and I have a good business model.
Right.
And then as far as the marketing, I mean, it goes back, and again, we didn't talk about all of that. That would be a whole nother conversation, but people need to continue to hear from you. They need to know that you're following sanitary processes to continue to make your products. They need to know that you're still up for sale. They need to know where they can buy from you if it's online now instead of in stores. So that's another point that I think for small businesses is we have to be very visible right now. Mm-hmm. We have to make sure that we're constantly communicating, that we're constantly letting people know that we're thinking about them. I mean, they're struggling just like we are.
Right.
Maybe in a different way, but it's still a struggle. So those would kind of be my 2 cents on that.
Any more thoughts?
I would just say from an advertising standpoint, any one of us can help you with strategy around how you might use your marketing advertising dollars. you're going to have to think about what those dollars are. So Deborah happened to put the chat in for everyone, so I feel okay sharing her and using her as an example. But the person you may have paid to stand in Schnucks and do a tasting, you're now going to have to use that same money to run digital ads or to make sure that your e-commerce on your website is up, right? So a shifting of costs is probably going to occur, and you may need to put more money into areas that you thought were less important or didn't need as much attention. So again, running those financial scenarios, I may not have to pay Christy to do the tasting anymore, but how much money does that free up for me to do an advertising spend? And then what strategy have I been able to work on with an advisor to test some things along the way and see what works and what doesn't work and continue tweaking? And this is going to be really important to figure out. I did see one of the things, what about sending samples in the mail? Again, I would say run the scenario. What's going to cost for you to mail a perishable good? What kind of risk and liability does that open you up to?
Absolutely.
What will you have to communicate to the customer for them to feel comfortable receiving it in their home? I'm not saying you can't do it, but like Gabriella said, sometimes we are we're the realist in the room that goes, that's a great idea. Let's think through what that'll take. What's going to be possible, and how is that going to translate into sales? Because we can come up with a lot of fun things to do too, but if we can't turn them into sales, then there's no point.
So it sounds like you guys are saying plan. That's Kevin. Gabriella said we got to communicate, and Christy says you got to try some things and know your market and think about shifting your expenses. Maybe you were paying for that person to be in the store. Now think about digital marketing for that. So are there any final thoughts about this? Anybody dying to share something? Erica, got any more information to share that's premature?
Right, exactly. Give us a heads up.
And if not, I'd like to thank all of our panelists, Erica, Christy, Gabriella, Kevin. Like to thank Cheryl and BioSTL for partnering with us on this webinar.
We're happy to do it. You're off.
Thank you.
My computer. This webinar will be sent out after we conclude. A final big thank you to our sponsors, technology partners, and Kitty Academy, who is serving St. Louis healthcare and essential businesses during this time. I think we have a slide with some upcoming chamber webinars. If you're available, please feel free to join us. Every one of these webinars is chock full of this kind of good information. The Tuesday webinar usually features some public officials, some state officials, so you can hear about things that they're doing and how they're navigating and planning to navigate forward post-COVID-19. And thank you for joining us again. I hope you all have a wonderful day. See you next time.
Thank you, Lakeisha, for being my co-moderator, and thank you to the panelists. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.